Yo, what's up? We're now sitting in an Xpeng G6 Performance, and in this video I'm gonna talk about how bad the Chinese cars are. Bring the popcorn, sit down and listen. Alright, listen for a while. Hey my friend. But no, okay. No, but okay, it's not that bad really. But okay, I already made a 4K podcast about how bad Chinese cars are. What's up with this time? Okay, today I'll talk about how the Chinese cars are lying. They're liars. Yes, this is the next diesel. This is the China Gate. Yeah, and it's not the Great Wall of China. No, so okay, maybe I over dramatize it a bit, but okay. Where do I start? The Chinese cars, they don't always show you the correct consumption numbers. It's misleading, confusing. For example, okay, here in the Xpeng, it is slightly better, but still confusing. Because I can tell you that in the G6, there is right now a since startup distance. It says 90 kilometers, now 90.2. Whoa, don't slow down here. Shit, what the heck, man? It's an 80 zone. The other cars are going fine. Why the heck do I slow down here? I'm using LCC. Okay, whatever. And then I have time, 1 hour and 24 minutes. And then I have average consumption, 153 watt-hour per kilometer. Yeah, and in order to reset that since startup, there is no reset button somewhere in the screen. You have to exit the car, lock it, and then unlock it, and then it will be reset. But there's always a butt crack. It does not always reset. It seems like if I do it too quick, if I just exit the car, lock it, and then come and unlock it immediately, when I come back in the car, this is what I did in the range test. Distance is zeroed out, time is zeroed out, but average consumption stays the same. And once you start driving, you will notice something weird, which is that, wait, that average consumption seems to not fluctuate, which it should do initially. So it wasn't reset, And then if you go to the car menu, you go to vehicle, you scroll down a bit. There is a trip A and trip B along with some total distance, and that's odometer. And yeah, that's kind of where after being charged, you have 92 kilometer. And that's also a nitpicking also. If it's exactly 92 kilometer, it doesn't show any decimals, but then suddenly it shows 0.1. Yeah, as a decimal. Oh, let me just get. It should instead show 0.0, of course. But it's weird. It has this trip, but the trip A, trip B, there's a reset button there without confirmation, which is bad also. When you reset it, you only reset the distance. Yeah. It is not connected to the consumption or the time or whatever you have in a since startup. So that's weird. Most other cars, like Tesla, Volkswagen, the French cars, Stellantis car, they have a trip meter. Usually a trip, I don't know, a trip A, or they call it maybe long-term and short-term since charging. They have several trip meters. Some of them are automatically reset since charging. Usually is automatically reset. And each trip contains at least a distance, sometimes a time or average speed, but also what is quite common is that it should at least include distance and average consumption since you restarted it. That's how it works with most cars. That's typically a definition. When you restart a trip, you drive a distance, and okay, I don't have to explain that, the logic behind it. But for some reason, the Chinese cars, they have this rolling average money. Like I can mention BYD, Hongxi, Maxus, all that. Like, pretty much every Chinese car has this weird shit, except for MG. They actually have a trip meter more like a Western car, but they implemented it not long time ago. So, yeah. And the other problem is that, okay, I mean, what is the problem here? Well, the problem is that it's not clear how much you have consumed. You know, since you think that you reset the trip, yeah, I think it was even in the Hongxi and some of the other Chinese cars, there is a reset button. And then when you reset it, you see that distance and time or whatever is 0, but the consumption number stays the same. That is humbug. It's not supposed to be like that. Because when you start driving, if you reset everything to 0, if you start driving, you will usually get a spike. The reason why you get a spike up a high consumption in the beginning is because you normally accelerate to a certain speed and then you stay there, right? It's like now. Okay, in city driving it's different, but then you have kinetic energy stored in the car that you get back when you regen or slow down. If you slow down, it will even out the consumption. So typically, right when you start driving, you might have 300, 400, 500 watt-hour per kilometer, and then it drops quite quickly. And also the consumption fluctuates quite a lot because the distance is short. So how is that consumption calculated anyway? Well, the car's BMS knows how much electricity went through in the battery, right? So it will just measure how much we have consumed during the trip in kilowatt hour, and then it takes the distance it thinks it drove and divides the consumption in kilowatt hour or watt hour, right, on that, and then you get the number, which is for some reason displayed as kilowatt hour per 100 kilometer, which is silly. It's not logic at all. It's old-fashioned. It kind of derived from fossil industry, but I believe that even the fossil industry chose weird unit from the start, because nobody uses 100 kilometer as a unit. You know, I don't say that, oh, I drove 0.98 100 kilometer now, you know. So 0.98 cent, yeah. What is that? How far is it from Oslo to Trondheim? It's 4.8 cents. Okay. But okay, anyway, what I'm saying is that normally the consumption will spike at maybe 400, 500 watt-hour per kilometer. Then it drops quite quickly, and then it stabilizes maybe at 150, 200 watt-hour per kilometer. And the longer distance you drive, the longer that kinetic energy you have stored will be spread over, you know, a longer distance. But with the Chinese cars, you never see that fluctuation. You know, you reset everything, and the consumption almost doesn't change. Be like, that's a bit weird. And if I do a test, like if I drive, let's say 100 kilometer, but it's very important, you have to drive from point A to point B and back to point A to get an even consumption and not any like advantage, disadvantage in elevation change or wind. Then you can get quite consistent run. So if you drive at, for example, 120 kilometers per hour, you do a loop and come back, you will see that the consumption might change slightly. But if you do that long enough, you will see that it will stabilize on something, and that is that rolling average that the Chinese car counts. And how the heck do I figure out what it is? Well, that's quite hard, but normally I can kind of guess. Some cars, they might use 50 kilometer. I think the BYD uses 50 kilometer. It doesn't say anything anywhere, but they also have that graph, you know, that many cars have, the consumption graph. And then you can change between the last 10 kilometer, last 50 kilometer, last 100 something. And when I just, a coincidence, change it to last 50 kilometer there, and I look at that rolling average, they seems to correspond. And that's usually how I figure out that, okay, it should be every 50 kilometer then, or the last 50 kilometer it uses. And what else? But if you would do that, right, you drive until the consumption, you can drive several loops, and then if the consumption never changes, that means that you have found the rolling average distance, whatever, right? But if you then suddenly drive at 90 kilometers per hour instead of 120, you should have lower consumption. Like typically you will have around 30-40% lower consumption based on all my range tests. But it seems like it doesn't change that much. But if you keep driving that same loop over and over again, eventually you will see that it stabilizes at a lower number that is roughly 30-40%. You know, that's how you can figure out how it works. So this is misleading, because it means that if you hammer it, or if the consumption is higher for some reason, it doesn't show the correct consumption. I believe that consumers have the right to know what the correct consumption in the car is. I mean, why is it like this? I believe it's just sloppy implementation from the Chinese. And unfortunately, the Chinese people, they like to copy from others, and they tend to copy from other Chinese. So that, so that's why the Chinese cars, they are so much alike, and they have the same weirdness, or what I should call it. But that part, okay, you can say it's not intentional, but there are other parts that are intentional, which is that which is that the Chinese cars, they tend to cap the consumption. They don't show the consumption if it's higher than a certain threshold. So this is also different. I've seen it that in the Aura Good Cat, and it's been a while now, Aura Funky Cat in Europe. It's been a while since I tested it, but I believe it was 200 watt-hour per kilometer. So it will show in the display 20 kilowatt-hour per 100 kilometer, and it will never go higher than that number. But but if you drive slow enough, or if you drive downhill for a while, suddenly it will pop below 200, right? So it means that internally the car already counts and knows the actual consumption, but it doesn't show you if it's too high. Is that because of sloppiness of implementing? No, it's because they intentionally want to lie about the consumption. Because some cars, they might have a limit on digit, which is still kind of weird. Some European cars, maybe like German cars, they might show 999 watt-hour per kilometer as the highest, right? But then not many cars have that high consumption over time. So not long after, it will stabilize, and then you at least see 300, 400 watt-hour per kilometer and lower, right? But Tesla even shows over 1,000 watt-hour per kilometer if it's needed. So what the heck, man? Why is it so smelly? I think I have Dieselgate in front of me. It's an Audi. Shit. Wait, let me recirculate, man. Shit. There. So, yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, why do I know this? Because I have tested those Chinese cars. This is not just empty claims. I've tested plenty of Chinese cars, man. Hongxi, like I mentioned, the Hongxi BYD, many different BYDs, MG, what is again, Maxus, yeah, and pretty much all of them, they do the same shit. They just mislead the users. So how can you implement a trip meter? Well, one way to do this is, okay, come on, Chinese guys, take notes. You take a checkpoint. This is actually similar to what ScanMyTesla app is doing, you know, the OBD tool, whatever, for Tesla. You can make several trip meters, and it will just take a snapshot of current variables, and then you can even close the app, and it will just calculate every time you want to display this. Unlike some other systems, I'll come back to that soon. But so the way it works is that you need to check the current odometer. Just write down or save it, what the current odometer is, and then save the current discharge energy. And then also save the current charge energy, because that's important for regen. And then at a given point, after driving a certain distance, you just check odometer again, and then take a delta between that current odometer versus the reset point. And then you take the energy you have spent versus the reset point. But you also have to take into account the charge energy, which is then regen. But by doing that, you divide it by the distance you think it has, then you get the consumption. And this is why I always correct for consumption when I do the distance correction, because distance is not always displayed correctly. There might be a couple of % error why is the error still there? Why is the error there? Why don't they just make it dead even? Well, it's because you can have different wheel sizes, and even the law allows you to have some different wheel sizes. So the wheel size could vary up to 1 to 2%, which directly translates to 1 to 2% error in the distance. But you should not confuse that error with speed error, because all cars have been designed so that when you think you're cruising at 90 kilometers per hour on the speedo, your real speed is always lower, like 88, typically most cars 87. Yeah, that's why you see in my range test when I cruise at 90, I have to cruise at 93 on the speedo to match the 90 GPS speed. And Tesla is the most correct there. Usually Tesla, when you cruise at 90, you have 88 or 89 kilometers per hour, many times actually 89, so they're spot on there. Whereas some of the Korean cars, they are really bad. Like you cruise at 90, but the real speed is 84 or 85. But the error there, you see, is a lot higher in percent than the distance error, which typically is around, well, plus or minus 1%. The worst I've seen was Jaguar I-Pace. It displayed 2.7% too little, which means that if you think you have driven 100 kilometers, you've actually driven more than that. It's 102.7 roughly. So that's why, you know, that's why the car knows how many kilowatt hour it has consumed. It doesn't change based on what wheel you use or what tire pressure you have, but it divides it by the distance it thinks it has driven. So that's why I need to correct for this in my test to get the most accurate consumption numbers. But anyway, so that's how the trip meter is supposed to work, yeah. But there are some butt cracks. What if you consume electricity while you're stationary, right? Then the system needs to not count that. But it depends how it is, because many German cars, they count stationary consumption, which I disagree with. Stationary consumption, it depends what situation. If the car is in park, especially, the trip has ended, but they still count the consumption up. But of course, if you are in drive and you are in auto hold and you are stopped at a stoplight, then technically the trip is still ongoing. But it's easy to figure out this, to distinguish between them. Wow, the consumption is 137 watt hour per kilometer. Yeah, you see, this seems to be correct now. But a couple of days ago, actually yesterday when I tested it, the consumption number was not reset when I left the car. Wow, it means that this car can possibly go over 600 kilometers. Oh, I will see. Yeah, I'm also live streaming now. But okay, so that's fine. Okay, we're not going to discuss what is the correct consumption, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I need to point out something here. A general misconception. Many people believe that Tesla shows incorrect numbers, that Tesla is lying about this, and that they don't show energy used for heating or even preheating the battery or whatever. That is incorrect. That is a direct lie. People are clueless. I have tested this, of course. Yeah, during winter I shut off the heater and I drove a test stretch, and then I had the heater on, and the consumption was of course higher with heater on. And same also if you preheat the battery, it will suck extra there. But I think the reason why people believe that Teslas show incorrect consumption is because Tesla, at least traditionally, they stop counting the consumption once you put the car in park. But I think lately they even changed it. I think that happened already a couple of years ago, that even when you're in park, the consumption number still goes up, and even the time and whatever still counts in park. And plus that the other reason why people make up excuses or false claims why Tesla doesn't show correct numbers is because Tesla, they are really efficient. They have incredible low numbers, and they just don't believe it's that high, so they have to come up with excuses or explanations, false explanations why. But I can of course verify that. There are plenty of ways to verify things. You know, if the car is lying about something, you can always figure out things. For example, also in the BYD, I tried BYD Seal and the Seal U and those cars. Those cars, they actually work with a car scanner. I can poke into the BMS and I can see the numbers that the accumulated charge and discharge energy, and based on those numbers I could then figure out how much energy we have spent, and I cross-check against the claim rolling average, and it was like, okay, that rolling average is not since reset time, you know. There are other ways to also figure out things. If you discharge, also this is something I hear from time to time. When I refer to the trip meter, I know how much it will consume, people ask me, but how can you trust that? Well, yeah, you cannot trust it apparently on fossil cars because they might be incorrect. I don't know about that. But with EVs, there are ways to verify this by doing the charging test. But so you can check. Well, how is this again? If you discharge whatever, right? The consumption. Yeah, you take the consumption. For example, you charge the car to 100%. You drive it until it's almost empty, and you look at how many kilometers you have driven, and you multiply that by the consumption, and you will then get the kilowatt hour you have discharged. But then there will be a discharging loss, just the way it works, the physics, that if you have higher power output, you will have more losses. Higher current means low losses. So usually this is also why, for example, in EV database, the net capacity is claimed to be whatever kilowatt hour, but when I do the actual driving test, I get a lower consumption than that, a lower kilowatt hour than that. And I also tested when I did some autobahn hammering that when you hammer it fast or accelerate hard or just have high power output when you're going at 200, 250 kilometers per stunde, you have more heat loss and you get less energy out of the battery. You know, this is just battery. This is how the batteries work. It's not something I made up. It's just the way batteries work. But okay, so based on all these things I mentioned now, you can verify things by doing that discharging test to figure out how much energy you have, and then you can do a charging test to figure out how much you put into the battery, right? But if you use DC charging as a test, DC charging could involve, usually involves cooling. It could also involve heating, and also charging heat loss. Because again, like I mentioned, when you discharge at high rate, you have losses. You also have losses when you charge at high rate. Why do you think cooling has to run? Because the battery heats up, and they also heat up in 800 volt systems, by the way. The whole 800 volt hype, man. Oh, don't slow down here. Shit, man. Dude, freaking Chinese cars. So, yeah, sorry, a little bit back and forth here, but the best way, if you want to verify things, is that you could do a charging test on AC, because DC charging has too many unknown variables. AC charging has less unknown variables. At least you have only the discharging. You have the AC conversion, AC-DC conversion lost in the onboard charger, which I measured to be around 8 to 10%. But then usually when you're charging on AC, it goes so slow that you don't have that much heat generated, and the battery doesn't cool or heat up normally. So based on the charging test versus the discharging or whatever, I could figure out the energy, right? And then the distance is also quite easy, because as long as I have a well-known distance, I can figure out the distance and the energy, and then I can figure out the consumption. But it is clumsy the way the freaking Chinese cars are implemented, that they don't show this correctly. They lie about things, they cap shit. So I have to find my own ways to calculate how the consumption is. But I mean, okay, I can usually figure out, because I'm some experienced EV driver, I test cars. But what about the average consumers, right? They don't know, right? They don't know about this. They don't know how thirsty that Chinese car really is, or yeah. So I believe that this should be fixed. I want to expose this. I've known this for a long time, that the Chinese cars, they're doing this weird shit. But maybe not most people, they don't care. Okay, they probably don't even know, right? Did you know about this, that your Chinese car doesn't display consumption correctly? No, you didn't, right? Or if you knew, maybe you didn't care. But I believe that this is something that at least EU should be stricter about. I mean, the EU is quite strict about everything. They try to protect the consumer, so they should of course also display this correctly, so that we know exactly how much the car is using. Yeah. So what can the Chinese car manufacturer do? Well, they can implement a trip meter. I mean, they are so good at copying. Why don't they look at the German car brands or any brand in the West? Well, actually, they don't have to look west. Just look east. The Koreans have done it correctly. The Japanese, mostly correctly-ish. Yeah. So just implement it like other cars. You know, have some kind of trip A, trip B. Since last charge, very nice to have. Automatically reset after you charge it. Right? You know, and then include distance. Maybe time is a nice bonus. Average speed could be useful to have, and the average consumption. And for God's sake, for Elon's sake, stop using kilowatt hour per 100 kilometer. It's a stupid unit. Use watt hour per 100 kilometer. Sorry, watt hour per kilometer instead, because everyone knows watt hour, and the metric system is very nice, easier to understand anyway. We don't need to have to relate to 100 kilometer as a unit. Yeah. So now, hopefully, the Chinese, they will do something. I'm not hoping that they're gonna do anything. This video is probably as pointless as yeah, whatever, right? But at least I did. Yeah, I know. This video is as pointless as me trying to explain to you guys the difference between kilowatt and kilowatt hour. I need to make another rant about that kilowatt hour. I guess. Even authors like Elbilmek, the EV Association, you know, like even they don't get this right. They mix kilowatt and kilowatt hour. So consumers, of course, they don't understand this, and then they also make the same mistake. And I believe it should be correct. Well, maybe I'm like a grammar Nazi. Like I don't like it when people don't use question mark when they ask questions. That they use comma. Like, how are you, Bjørn? How are you, comma, Bjørn? You know, yeah. You know, people have died because of comma errors. You know, skyt han, ikke vent til jeg kommer. Yeah, there should be a comma there. Skyt han, ikke vent til jeg kommer. Yeah, skyt han ikke. No, shoot him not. Wait until I come. Yeah, shoot him. Comma, don't wait until I come, or shoot him not. Okay, it works better in Norwegian because we have ikke as okay, whatever. I fail. But yeah. So I believe that things should be as correct as possible, ABC, and that's also why I think that consumption needs to be displayed correctly. So yeah, but I'm gonna end my rant now, and if you guys feel like it, I should make a rant about kilowatt hour, and why we should use the correct units, and also why we should have as good grammar as possible, especially if you have written articles, you know. Yeah, they definitely should use the correct units, and everything should be correct, you know. Like, just you can ask yourself, sorry, I can't hold myself over there. You can ask yourself, if you read an article and names and like person names and country names are not capitalized, and there's this sloppy grammar, do you take that article seriously? No, you don't, right? Which means that for the best perfection, for the best what the heck is car doing now? Shit. To perfect your article, you have to have everything correct. Yeah. And to perfect your car, you have to have everything correct. So okay, I'm gonna end it now. So end of ranting. It was actually not that long, only half an hour. Wow, I'm surprised. Man, why the heck does it start fogging in here? Oh no, recirculation is on. Shit, I forgot. Yeah. Okay, it was after that. No, it's still. Oh shit, I still have that fossil in front of me. Am I gonna die now because of Dieselgate? Okay, let's hope not. So yeah, if I didn't die, then you will see this video uploaded tonight. Anyway, I think that's gonna be for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, thank you for watching, and talk to you later.